Hello, Christmas fans. I've made a few Christmas cone trees in my day, and I thought it would be easier for all of you if I compiled all of the Christmas cone trees that I have done to date into one video. So here they are for your enjoyment. So for this tree, I am using fur yarn. This is Red Heart brand fur, and this color is Polar. It also comes in a bunch of other colors. So this is pretty simple, really. The basic gist of this is hot glue and stick the fur on with hot glue. Just try not to burn your fingers and start at the bottom and work your way up. And the only other thing is to remember to kind of scrunch it down so you don't have spaces where the cone shows through, and that's it. For this tree, I used rose petals, silk rose petals from the dollar store. These are in the wedding section. And I drew lines on the cone at 1-inch intervals just to make sure that I had a straight line to follow. I used about one full pack of the rose petals. And this is another one where it's pretty easy, just a matter of just apply hot glue along the line and then press on the petals. This is where my fake nails come in real handy because I don't get burnt when I'm pressing them on because I use the tips of my nails. So what I wanted to do with this one was to use like these sort of foamy roses, and I got these from Dollarama, $1.25 or $2 for like a little pack of like 9. So instead, I bought these little, they're like little wedding balls from the wedding section. So this is $3, and once you peel all the roses off the ball, there's like a way more than you would get in the other pack. So this is like what's off of one rose. So that's enough to do about 1/3. So I bought 3 of them. To start, mark lines on your tree at 1-inch intervals. These are silver mini cupcake liners from the Dollar Tree. Take them in bunches and cut them in half. I used about 1 full package. Starting at the bottom of the tree along the back seam, glue them with the ruffled side down and the straight edge up. Glue them end to end until you get all the way around the tree. Then do a second row overlapping so that you don't see any of the silver from the bottom of the tree. Here's what the first row should look like. For the next row, start at the same seam and just overlap the first row. This one only needs to be done as a single, not as a double like the first row. Continue until you're finished. For glue, you don't need a lot. You basically can just put a dot on either end and a little couple dots in the middle, and that's enough glue to hold these down. When you get to the top of the tree, you're just going to wrap these all the way around, and you're going to alternate until you get to the very top of the tree, and then you're done. This is a little stencil that I ordered off of Amazon. I'll leave the link below. It is painted with a base coat of silver metallic from Rust-Oleum. I'm using spray adhesive on the stencil and then just giving it a second to dry and then applying it to the tree. Once the stencil's in place, you're going to want to apply something to hold down the glitter. This one here that I'm using is actually a glitter paint, and it worked really well except for that it took quite a while to dry. You can also use Mod Podge or even just Elmer's white glue. So then we're going to take our silver glitter and we're going to sprinkle it onto the wet surface. It's a good idea to put either a piece of paper or paper towel underneath so that any over sprinkles won't go to waste. If you've got a good coat of glitter on there, you're going to want to just tap off the excess onto the sheet below, and then you're just going to peel it away before it's dry, and you're going to have a really beautiful finish. While you're waiting for the first section to dry, you're going to want to clean off your stencil. Give it a good wash. You can use a little bit of soap and water to get most of the glitter and the glue off. Blot it between a piece of paper towel, but don't leave it in there to dry, or the remaining spray adhesive will actually stick to the paper towel and kind of make a mess. I speak from experience. Once one section is dry, you can move on to other areas. You don't have to worry too much about overlap because you're using a paintbrush. You're actually able to paint like right into the areas where you want your glue. And then you're just going to continue around as each area dries until you've gotten most of the cone done. When I got to the very top section of the cone, it was a little bit too narrow to wrap the stencil around. So what I did was I just freehanded the design on using a silver Sharpie. And where there were creases in the cardboard, I actually used those sort of as a guide to where to put my lines so that you wouldn't notice the creases. They'd be covered in glitter. For this portion, I used Elmer's white glue because it has a really good application nozzle. And then just add glitter as you did before. Once again, my tree is pre-painted and I've drawn lines. So this ribbon is from Walmart and it is really pretty and iridescent, and it's the same on both sides. For the first layer of ribbon, we're just laying it down flat and just gluing one piece all the way around the bottom so that you don't see any of the original cone. Next, lay out a portion of ribbon, but don't cut it off the spool, and just mark off 2-inch intervals using a Sharpie. You won't see these marks, it'll be covered up. Then you're going to pinch it off at the 2-inch marks where you've marked it with your Sharpie, and just give it a little small pinch so it gives it a bit of a ruffle. Starting on the back side, so we always start at the back seam and keep all the joins on the one side. So apply a line of glue along the line that you've drawn, and then really we're just going to press down the flat sections. Don't try to press out the pleats because it'll probably just mess things up. Press down all the flat sections, and then once it's dry, then you just want to bend the pleats over so that they're flat. When you get to the top section of the tree, you're just going to take a small piece of ribbon and fold it basically into a little cone. And then you're just going to top off your tree with it. This ribbon has amazing iridescence when the light hits it. And here are my 3 silver trees all set up in my entranceway. I painted 2 of the cones with Rust-Oleum metallic spray paint, and for the third one I applied a gold metallic foil adhesive paper to it before rolling it. You don't have to do this part, you could just as easily spray all 3 of the trees in gold. On the bottoms of these ones, I used gold dollar store paper plates, and they work quite well. So I chose some ribbon from Dollarama, and basically I just grabbed 2 that happened to have the same pattern, and it turned out that it worked out to be a pretty close match to the gold, which is excellent. I cut a piece that was just slightly longer than the height of the cone, and then I cut 8 more pieces the same. I marked the bottom of the plate off in halves, quarters, and eighths, so that my ribbons would be evenly spaced. I started by gluing one end of the ribbon to the top of the cone without any extra overlap, and then pull the piece of ribbon taut and fold it under the bottom and glue it, hold it and glue it in place on the bottom. So then I decided that it was entirely too plain and it needed to be blinged up a little bit. This is Bling on a Roll, otherwise known as diamond wrap. And first thing I'm going to do is measure a piece that is the full, just slightly over the full length of the cone. And then take our scissors and we are going to cut them all into individual pieces. So we're going to need 8 pieces to go all the way around the cone in between the existing ribbon. And same as we did with the ribbon, we are going to start by attaching one end of the diamond wrap to the very top of the cone and then pulling it taut and affixing it underneath the cone on the plate. Repeat this step until we have a row of diamond wrap in between every row of ribbon all the way around the cone. For the bottom of the cone, I used adhesive rhinestones, and the reason that I did this instead of just using a single row of diamond wrap is because it would lump up over top of the diamond wrap. So I just stuck down the rhinestones in between the diamond wrap, so from one to the next over top of the ribbon, and then broke it off. So after doing more than a few of these cone trees, I have come up with a much better way of adding lines, since most of my cone trees require lines be added before adding any kind of finish. So I started by marking lines at 1-inch increments up the seam of the tree. And then what you want to do is you want to grab your Sharpie and place it at the 1-inch mark, and don't move your hand, and then just rotate the tree around gently. Once the lines get higher than you can comfortably hold your hand, I just added something to rest my hand on. In this case, it's just a Dollar Tree gift box, and continue the process until complete. The beads that I used for this tree are from Dollar Tree, and you can find them in the party section, and they come in lots of colors, and I have used them in gold. So this tree has lines marked at 1-inch intervals, and then along those lines I've marked off at the 2-inch marks all the way around so that I can keep my swags nice and even. So just add a drop of glue at all the 2-inch marks and then attach the beads, keeping the swags nice and even all the way around the bottom level of the cone tree. Alternate the swags so that it creates like an opening in between the beads, and continue doing this all the way up the tree. It gets a bit harder to do as you get further up, but if it doesn't continue all the way up, it's fine, it'll still work out. Again, I decided it wasn't blingy enough for my liking, so I added some rhinestone gems. These are just assorted size gems from Dollar Tree, and I've used the larger ones on the bottom section of the tree for the first 3 or so rows, and then I used the smaller ones the rest of the way up. The top of my tree got a tiny bit munched while I was making it, so to finish off the top, what I ended up doing was I got 2 of the larger rhinestones and I applied them to kind of front and back and stuck them together to make a bit of a star for the top of the tree. But because I like to provide you guys with options, here is some bling wrap that I picked up from Dollarama, and it's shaped like little flowers with diamonds in the middle. So I peeled off one of those and cut the little pieces of string off of it, and I'm going to use this as the star on the top of my tree. Well, this one got even blingier than I intended it to be, and it's got a little bit of weight to it. So here it is in all its glory. Like the previous tree, this one starts with some lines being drawn around the circumference of the tree. These lines are at the 2-inch mark, so they're 2 inches apart, and I did this on the 18-inch tree, which means there are 9 sections. And then I took some ribbon, gold ribbon, and I just wrapped it around the tree at the 2-inch mark lines. I didn't glue it all the way around, I just tacked it on a couple of spots. So this is tube confetti, which I didn't even know existed until recently, but it was pretty sparkly and I picked it up at Dollar Tree. So we're going to use Mod Podge to attach this, and the one thing that you want to pay attention to when you're doing this is you don't want to get your Mod Podge all over your ribbon. You want to keep your ribbon clean. So when you're applying the Mod Podge, you're going to just get it on your brush and you're going to sort of tap your brush up against the ribbon so that it doesn't actually get on the ribbon, it just goes up to the edge of the ribbon, just like this. Once a section is coated in Mod Podge, and you want to coat it pretty well, you don't want it drippy, but you want it pretty well coated, then you're going to just take your tube confetti, and I've put it in a paper plate here, and you're just going to dump it on top, and then once you've got a really good layer of it dumped on, you're kind of going to pat it down a little bit and continue all the way around until that whole section is covered in tube confetti. And it's best to let each section dry before you go working on the next section, because there's a really good risk that you're going to smudge it around. On the lower and larger sections of the cone, I dumped the tube confetti out of the plate and just put it on a piece of paper with a nice crease in it so I can dump it back out when I'm done. And then this time you're just going to roll your cone, and I actually did 2 sections at once when I got to the bottom. So basically you're just going to roll your cone into the tube confetti and tamp it down and then just let it dry. And here is our confetti tree all done. I suggest that you actually add another additional layer of Mod Podge on top of the tube confetti to keep it in place. Thank you so much for joining me for this latest round of mini trees or Christmas cone trees. Now let's move on to a set of pink. For this tree, we're using Dollar Tree crepe paper. For the bottom row, cut a piece of crepe paper wider than the base of the tree. Attach it using hot glue and pull it tight around the bottom of the tree. It's all the way around the bottom and covers the pink cardboard. For the next row, cut a piece of crepe paper and stretch one long edge all the way along. Attach it above the previous row about halfway, adhering it with hot glue. It'll give a slightly ruffled effect. And here's a completed first row. Continue with successive rows until you get to the top of the tree. This is a super easy project, one that you could do with your kids or your grandkids. And you don't have to do this one just for Valentine's Day. You could do this for another holiday and just change up the color of the crepe paper. When you get to the final row, just take a small piece of crepe paper and wrap it around the top in a cone shape. For this cone tree, we're using Dollar Tree pink silk petals. Take one of the petals and lay it flat on your work surface. Glue one of the pointed edges with hot glue and fold the petal over onto itself, making sure that it sticks well. Try not to burn yourself. It might be advisable to use a craft stick. And it should look like this. Rinse and repeat until you have a bunch. Draw some guidelines in pencil around the circumference of the cone. Glue the petals down using hot glue. You just need to apply a little bit of glue at the top. Make sure that you've got them all facing in the same direction, and make sure that you check the direction before you put the glue on. Continue until you've gotten all the way around the first row. When you get to the last spot, tuck your petal in behind the previous petal so you can't see where you started. And here's what the first completed row looks like. Continue adding rows and overlapping until you're complete to the top of the tree. And here it is, partially completed. When you're done, check over the tree to see if you have any spaces that need filling. And then just insert a petal wherever you need to fill in. For the next cone tree, we're going to use more of the crepe paper that we used in the first project. We're going to need a lot of little squares. In order to do this, unroll a long length of crepe paper and fold it over and back on itself several times until you've got a lot of thicknesses. Then we're going to cut off one end to get rid of all the folds. And because we want our pieces to be square, we're going to use a piece of the crepe paper and lay it across to make sure we're cutting it as wide as it is long, and use this as our template for cutting. And again, we're going to need a bunch, so cut up a bunch in advance before you start. I used Mod Podge to attach the pieces to the cone. Take the squares and fold them over the end of a pencil eraser. You might remember similar projects like this from when you were in school. Nothing wrong with keeping it simple and maybe a little bit old school. Then you're going to attach the crepe puffs onto the cone tree with Mod Podge. Originally, I applied the Mod Podge directly to the exterior of the cone tree and then just pressed on the crepe puffs. But after doing a little bit more of the tree, I decided it was more efficient to just put some Mod Podge onto a plate. This is just a disposable Dollar Tree plate. And then just dip them into the Mod Podge before adhering them to the outside of the tree. Here it is with a few rows completed. You won't need to worry about guidelines for this project. Just keep adding the crepe puffs as you go. So if you watched my How to Make a Perfect Cone video, you'll note that I usually put a bottom in my cones. And for this one, I've put them in, but I haven't glued them in, so I'm going to remove them while I'm working on the cones and then add them back in after. Funny story, I originally painted this cone with a coat of flat black spray paint, and then I used a metallic acrylic paint, and then after I was all done, I decided that I preferred the metallic turquoise Rust-Oleum spray paint that I have, and I used that and painted over top. This paint is almost like automotive paint. This is a technique that I first used in a thrift flip video, which I'm going to link above and in the description box. And what it entails is using metallic silver nail polish and just getting it dripping out of the bottle, and then you just do sort of a flick back and forth, and it gives you a really cool sort of an abstract linear effect. The second cone I've done in purple, and I started out with a coat of Perfect Purple from Folk Art Paints. Next, I added a coat of this really cool color shift paint, which is a mix of purple and a gold tone, and is also from Folk Art. I'm using an oval chalk painting brush to apply the paint. These craft mirrors I picked up at Michael's. They're in 3 different sizes, and I'll link to some below in case you can't find these ones at Michael's. I just attached them to the tree in kind of a random order using hot glue, and keeping some of the larger ones at the bottom of the cone tree and some of the smaller ones towards the top. For tree number 3, I started out with a coat of flat black spray paint, using Folk Art metallic sapphire paint, which is my new favorite blue paint. I'm using an oval blending chalk paint brush to put the paint on. I found this works best. Also, I found that the paint goes on a little bit better if you add just the tiniest bit of water. Basically, all I did was wet the brush and then wring it out, and that was enough water to help the paint spread properly. Also note that I've got my bottom section tucked in here, which is just a little Dollar Tree plastic round plate. And to decorate, I am using Dollar Tree silver picks. I attached these using hot glue, and I glued them in 3 spots, not at the very top and not at the very bottom. So as you can see here, I'm just gluing a glob here, here, and there. And that way we can still hold on to the tops and the bottoms and not get glue everywhere. Really importantly, you want to line these up to the bottom of the cone, and that'll keep it even all the way around. So just keep gluing these little picks on one at a time until you've worked your way all the way around the cone. When you get to the last section on the bottom of your cone, you may have to adjust the picks just a little bit to make sure that you don't have a gap. After the bottom was complete, I did the top of the cone tree. I placed one pick and then I did a second one on the opposite side of the cone tree, and then I went and did the other 2 sides to make sure that they were all even. So I've got 4 picks on the top of the tree. For the second row, I just placed the picks alternating and staggered down between the 4 top ones. And to finish it off, I added a 3rd row with the picks staggered between the picks from the 2nd row. So here are my non-traditional colored blue and purple toned DIY Christmas cone trees. This one's for all of you out there that love those aluminum Christmas trees on the Christmas tree lot in the Charlie Brown Christmas movie, like me. Hello and welcome to my 12 days of cone trees. This is day 1. This cone's been given a coat of Rust-Oleum in gold metallic. Here's a little walkthrough on how to make a bottom for your cone. I generally start with something that's about the right size that's already in the shape of a circle. So now I'm just going to trace around the roll of masking tape onto a piece of scrap foam core using a Sharpie. To avoid a lot of bending with your foam core, first cut off all the large chunks before cutting out your circle in its entirety. And now I'll just pop the cone on top and push it into place. We're going to be using some gold beads in a smaller size as well as the larger ones. For the bottom row, I decided to go with a little bit larger bead. This was actually recycled from a project I did previously. I'm using hot glue to attach these beads, and I find it best to leave it flat on the table so they stay nice and even. And then just do a little section at a time and glue the beads and hold them in place until they're nice and dry. And work your way around the entire cone. And then for the next row, I'm going to be using your standard Dollar Tree beads. Also going to use these ones in gold. I'm applying this row directly on top of the previous row and again attaching it using hot glue. These are the adhesive stickers that I'm going to be using, and I picked these up at the dollar store. I'm attaching the row of stickers just slightly above the row of beads, just leaving a little bit of space, making my way around the cone. Popping open a new strand of beads. This next row is going to go directly on top of the row of stickers. Just in case you don't already know this about me, I am Canadian. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. So here's the cone after 2 rows of the stickers. Notice anything? Yeah, me too. They're getting a little bit crooked, so let's fix that. So I've got my next row of beads and my next row of stickers kind of lined up where they're going to be. And then I'm going to use my gold Sharpie to make a little mark so I know where that line's going to go for the top row of stickers. I call this the D9 method. I'm just taking something that's about the right height to rest my hand on so that my line ends up where I want it to be. And then I just turn the cone all the way around, making sure that the bottom of the cone stays nice and flat on the tabletop. It's a good idea to glue the ends of the stickers, particularly when you're gluing onto a painted surface, as sometimes they have a tendency to peel off over time. You don't need to glue down the whole sticker, just the ends will be sufficient. So now that you've got the hang of it, just continue alternating rows until you get to the top of the cone. Here's my first attempt. Instead, let's use this little Christmas bauble. I'm using wire cutters to cut the top section off of the ornament, and I used a straw to attach to it so it was easier for painting. This is Treasure Gold by Folk Art, which is a really nice deep gold. I gave it 3 coats of the gold paint. To make the opening larger, I'm using a multi-tool, which is similar to a Dremel. I'll link to this in the description box below. These tools are super handy. Once you get the opening to the correct size, add it on, and you're done. If this video appealed to you, I've got another one I think you're gonna love. It's day 2 in the 12 days of cone trees. This cone is apple red, and this one's already got its bottom nicely tucked in place and perfectly fit. Let's add some buttons. You're gonna want to use most of your larger buttons on the bottom of the cone and the smaller ones as you work your way towards the top. I'll be attaching these using hot glue. And for this one, I'm going to just make sure I keep that bottom edge nice and straight so that the cone sits nice and flat when it's all done. So many choices. Is it just me, or does this have kind of overtones of Whoville? So it's just a matter of choosing buttons and putting them into place. Sometimes I dry fit them first and try to do a bit of a mix of colors and of sizes. Ultimately, it's a matter of pick them, glue them, and place them. These are the buttons that I used, and I picked these up at Dollarama. And because it feels a bit like making you watch paint dry, I'm going to show you the evolution of this tree through the magic of time-lapse. And now it's time to deal with all those unsightly and ever-irritating little glue strands. And I generally do this using a lint roller, since it's not really possible to put buttons around the top, and since the very top of my cone is a tiny bit bent and misshapen, I've decided to use a really pretty button on the top and use it kind of like a star on the tree. So I've glued one to the top of the tree on one side and added a different one for the other side. This way you can change your tree whenever you change your mind. It's the 12 days of cone trees. Can you believe we're already at day 3? This cone's been painted with a coat of silver metallic Rust-Oleum, and it's a little shorter than my cones usually are, at about 12 inches tall. I'm using this rhinestone trim that you can pick up at the dollar store. I'm applying the trim scallop side down to the bottom edge of the cone to make a nice neat border. I'm going to be using some of this trim that I picked up at the dollar store. I'm applying the first strip down the seam. This is where the first seam is, and I'm going on the opposite side to do the second strip. So first I split it in half, and now I'm going to quarter it by adding another strip right down the middle. Next I'm going to use these square rhinestones and I'm going to use them diagonally. Now I'm going to use some more rhinestones, these ones round and in strips. I'm starting this one at the top and I'm running it all the way down to the bottom between the square rhinestones, although it may take more than one piece. Then I added 2 more of the square rhinestones on either side for a total of 3 on each side. Next, I've chosen a sheet of rhinestones that are slightly smaller, and I'm going to use 1 line of these on either side of the center line. Now I'm just going to repeat the process in the other 3 sections. And I'm going to glue down the upper edges of the strips at the top section of the cone so that they don't come loose. Although it sits nice and flat on the table, it seemed like it just needed a little bit of a lift. The tree bottom is just a Dollar Tree glass candle holder painted with silver Rust-Oleum. Do you want to know a little secret? This cone tree was inspired by this Easter egg that I made. I've linked it here in case you want to check it out. But if you're not finished watching Christmas cone tree videos, I've got another one for you right here. Day 4, take 1, Q glitter. This is glitter fabric that I picked up at Dollarama. It's kind of like glittery paper, only it's on fabric. Nice and bendable. The backing is kind of a woven style. It's pretty durable and easy to cut, and we're going to cut it up into strips. You can do this by just using a ruler. I generally use the width of the ruler to define the width of my strip. And then you just cut them out, old school, with a pair of scissors. An easier way to cut your fabric into strips is by using a paper trimmer, which also works well for this type of fabric. Keep cutting until all your fabric is cut into strips. I used the entire roll for this cone tree. To make the point on my fabric strip, I used this little wood square to trace around, but you could just as easily rotate your ruler and use the end of that to draw it. This is the shape that we want to end up with. I measured in 2 inches from the end of the fabric strip, and this is where I'm going to make my cut. Gather up your strips, stack them into a pile. Before cutting out. Now we're ready to start gluing them onto the cone using hot glue, keeping the top corners of the point aligned with the bottom edge of the cone. Continue until you're completed the bottom row. Notice how the fabric is nice and flat against the cone. Apply the hot glue onto each side, leaving the center section open so it's easier to handle. When applying the second row, instead of laying the piece of fabric flat on the cone, I'm pushing the sides in a little bit so that it has a bit of a bow in it. This gives the cone tree a little bit more shape and definition, otherwise it would just be flat gold fabric laying on flat gold fabric and you wouldn't really see the shapes. Continue alternating rows so that each row covers the seam from the previous row. And here is what the first 3 rows look like. Someone remind me to stop using green masking tape. And before you know it, the entire tree is done. Now we just have to deal with the top of the tree. As you can see, the bottom of this tree is not flat. This is a terracotta pot with a coat of gold Rust-Oleum spray paint on the outside.
You can use it right side up and just place the tree on top, or place it upside down, which allows just enough of a lift to keep the pointed tips of the cone elevated. Here's a little info for you so you don't make this mistake that I made. If you're going to use metallic spray paint on a terracotta pot, you should know that it has a tendency to rub off. That's not good. So I'm going to paint another pot using Treasure Gold by Folk Art. This is 3 coats of Treasure Gold. However, I decided it didn't really work that well with the glitter cone, so I changed it. I went back to my Rust-Oleum Gold Metallic, but this time with an undercoat so it didn't rub off. See how much prettier that is? Right side up with the tree. And you can also switch the pot and flip it upside down. I've added a bottom into my tree to hold it higher up. Day 5, here's a super easy project for those of you that don't consider yourselves to be craftily inclined. I gave this cone a coat of gloss black spray paint. I'm also going to use this silver trim that I picked up at the dollar store. So originally I applied this onto the bottom edge of the cone before I applied any of the window clings. Oh, but wait! Actually, let's apply this a little later. These are snowflake themed window clings, so they're not actually sticky, they just use static to stick to the windows. But we're not going to use them on windows, we're going to apply them to our cone tree. They're not going to stick to the cone tree without a little bit of assistance. I named this cone tree Black Magic. When I was a kid, there were generally 2 choices for boxed chocolates at Christmas time: Black Magic and Pot of Gold. And both of these brands are still available for purchase today. What type of chocolates were under your Christmas tree? Let me know in the comments below. I generally find it's best to dry fit anything before you glue it in place. So find out where you want it, mark the place, and then glue it down. And then continue to add snowflakes where you want them so that you achieve a balanced design. Once you've placed all your snowflakes, it's a good idea to go around and just confirm that all the edges are properly secured down. Because I found that the window clings have a bit of a tendency to want to peel back, I gave the entire cone a coat of clear gloss varnish over top of the clings, which is why I told you to hold off on that trim earlier. And now is when we're going to add that metallic trim onto the bottom of the cone to finish it off. Days of cone trees. Thanks for sticking it out with me. Today is day 6, or is that daisy? This daisy ribbon came from Dollarama. This cone has been painted with apple red spray paint. Cut a piece of the daisy ribbon that fits around the cone, and as always, start at the back of the cone. So originally I applied spray adhesive to the back of the ribbon and then stuck it down using the spray adhesive. However, I did find over time that the spray adhesive didn't stick that well to the very glossy paint. So I would still suggest using the spray adhesive to get it into place and then supplementing with hot glue, which I used on the tops of the daisies anyway. Also, because of the sloping nature of the cone, I snipped out the upper attachment on these daisies, and then that allowed the flowers to lay flat. Second row, I should give you guys a warning that if you're at all OCD by nature, this one's probably going to drive you a little bit crazy because it's not going to line up perfectly because the daisies are all one size and the cone is getting progressively smaller as you get towards the top. Here is what it looks like after a few rows have been added. As I mentioned, I added a little bit of hot glue onto the tips of the flower to assist in adherence. Here I'm adding the last couple rows of flowers onto the tree. Most of the cone is pretty balanced. However, when you get to the back section where the flowers met up, there are some spaces. I just dealt with them by adding single flowers on top. Now it's time to add a little bit of embellishment to our tree, and I'm going to use these gold rhinestones. And I'm embarrassed to say it was just that easy. It's day 7. You won't find any swans swimming, but you might find some pearls. This is Rust-Oleum Rose Gold Metallic. However, it was a little too pink for me, so I added a coat of pearl mist on top. This is Peel and Stick trim, and it has a really nice mix of pearls and gems. I generally like to start off my cone trees with a nice solid base, and this one is no exception. This sheet of mini pearls is from Dollar Tree, and it's tiny little pearls connected by strands with an adhesive backing. I'm going to cut a few rows lengthwise. For my first cut, I'm going to trim away any bits on the outside edge of the pearls. And now I'll trim really tight to the other side so that there's no strings on this side either. Note that I've left the backing in place. So now I'm just going to attach the strand from the bottom edge and pull it tight up to the top peak of the cone. And then I'm going to repeat that process 3 more times so that the cone is evenly divided into quarters. I've already done 2 sections using a chevron pattern, and I will show you how I spaced them perfectly. I'm using these gems, and I'm actually just going to use the pearl stickers. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a sheet that was all pearls, so sometimes you've just got to make do. I've started with a full-length piece of the pearl trim. Attach one end in the lower corner and pull it tight across at an angle so that it fits across the section. This ensures that your longest piece is already placed and you'll only need smaller pieces to complete the section. I'm using masking tape to space the pearls evenly. Once I have the row of pearls in place, I take my piece of masking tape and line it up evenly directly against the pearls. And then I lay the next row of pearls right on the other side of the masking tape so that it's nice and even and they're all perfectly spaced. And just trim off any excess pearls. This is a classic chevron pattern. Continue this pattern around the cone. I have used 6 rows of pearls in each section. And now that I have all these sections, I just feel obligated to fill them up with something. I'm going to use these really cool rose stickers that I picked up at Dollarama. These stickers came in 2 sizes, and I'm going to use both, alternating between rows. Starting with the smaller stickers, I'm placing it across the section and alternating with the larger piece. Try to keep them centered, and if they're a little too large for the section, you can always trim them, or you can even press them a little closer together so that they fit. Continue alternating sizes until all of your sections are complete. Not bad at all, but to finish it off, I'm going to add 1 more row vertically on each section of the tip of the tree. Turns out there's no mermaids in the 12 Days of Christmas. Oh well, who doesn't love a good mermaid-inspired Christmas cone tree? I picked up these wooden circles at Dollarama. They came in assorted sizes. Here's what the first row looks like. For the first row, I'm using the largest size circles that came in the pack, and I'm just attaching them using hot glue and butting them up against each other so that they're fit tight all the way around the bottom. Row 2 is going to be medium. The measurement that I'm using to space the second row is to overlap the seam on the first row circles. third row, I'm returning to the larger circles, and once again, I'm placing them in between the spaces of the row below. And then row 4 is exactly like row 2. And now is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. For this next row, instead of putting the circles side by side, I'm leaving a space in between them. So every second one, there's going to be a space. Just like that. Because the circles are so rigid and have no flex, it's starting to get just a little bit wonky, so I think it's time to rein it in. On top of the intermittently spaced discs of row 5, I'm going to add another medium-sized circle, and then a small one on top so it looks like a little mini snowman. Truth be told, this tree is far from perfect. Because the circles are so rigid and the cone is rounded, there are areas that just don't sit as flat as I would have liked. But, as with all of my trees, I just position it so that the crappy side is facing the wall. Time to add paint. This is what it looked like before I added any paint, and the first coat I added was to do the whole thing in white. And then I did an ombre effect in silver, and the final coat is turquoise metallic. However, I did end up switching these colors up a little. So here you can see the layers of colors that I've used. The bottom section is white, with the next layer being a light blue, and then a coat of silver, and here I am applying the turquoise metallic. I probably should have stopped right about here, however, I felt like I needed just a little bit on the tops of the circles, and when I did that, I ended up covering up most of the silver. In order to ombre the paint, you just need to apply it very lightly in very light sweeps across the area where the existing paint color is. You want to just lightly hold the tab and not keep your finger pressed down on the nozzle. I'm just laying down a piece of double-sided tape from Dollar Tree. Let's add the circles. I'm going to use this metallic aquamarine because the color is close to the color of my spray paint. I'm just painting these with a brush. I also spray painted a batch of these in white, silver, and light blue, and then fixing it into place on the large circles of the bottom row. And then I just continued adding smaller discs onto larger ones in varying colors. You can mix these up however you like. And I even did a version where I added on these little iridescent shell stickers to give it more of a mermaid look, but ultimately I decided I liked it better without, but you can decide for yourself. It's day 9 in the 12 days of cone trees, and I feel like I'm seeing stars. These are star beads that I picked up at Michael's. I'm pretty sure you're supposed to make bracelets out of these, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a Christmas cone tree with mine. Bottom row. I'm just going to stick these on with what I would call the legs facing down and the arms facing out, and just continue all the way around until the first row is completely done. Next, I'm going to make a pyramid shape by applying 2 more beads on top of the first row and then another one to form the third row. And then I added a single bead in the space between the 2 pyramids all the way around the cone. And just a note that I changed the direction of the beads on every alternate row. I'm adding another single bead which makes a diamond shape above the pyramid. Continue this on all 4 sections. Just continue this pattern, alternating beads, until you reach the top of the cone. And of course, we can't forget about the star on the top of the tree. Now that we've completed the construction, it's time to add some color. The original color was silver, but I didn't like it, so I changed it to blue. But keep in mind, you can paint yours any color that you like. Here's what it looks like before I've added any embellishments. Let's find some embellishments, shall we? What to choose, what to choose. I think pearls. This is what I consider to be the fun part. These beads are perfect for adding a pearl. When attaching your pearls to the star beads, make sure that the stringing holes are not facing out and if they end up facing out, just tuck them off to the side. All those great bird references on days 1 through 7, and I choose to do feathers on day 10. This red cone perfectly matches the color of my feathers. Originally, I did the first row with the bend of the feathers facing towards the tree, and then the following rows with the bend of the feathers facing outward. Once I was finished adding feathers to my cone tree, there was too much room between the bottom of the tree and my first row of outward facing feathers. So I went back in the end and added more of the outward facing feathers to the bottom of the tree. You can save yourself the trouble by doing it at the beginning. I'm using hot glue to attach the feathers, and try to limit the application of the glue to the area where the stem is going to be so that you don't glue down a lot of the actual feather, just mostly the stem. I purchased these feathers from Michaels. They came in a sealed bag, so it's difficult to know what you're going to get until you open the bag. This feather is pretty much perfect. However, you would need to pick through a lot of bags of feathers to end up with enough of these to complete your cone tree project. I found that a lot of my feathers looked like this. Not really the shape I was looking for. Here's a workaround for you though. Take your badly shaped feather and trim the end into an arrow shape by first cutting one side and then the other. And you'll end up with this shape, which is much more desirable than this. For the next row of feathers, I attach them with the bend of the feather pointing away from the cone. And if you're smarter than me, this will be your second row facing outward. And then just continue working your way around the tree, keeping your feathers pointed in an outward direction and attaching using hot glue, mainly on the stem area. With this cone tree, you don't need to worry too much about making lines or making things perfectly even. You can just continue to add feathers in a fairly random pattern, just as long as you don't leave a lot of large gaps in your tree. Once I got to the top of the tree, I used some of these small downy feathers and attached them in an upward facing position. It's day 11 in the 12 days of cone trees. Get ready to be dazzled. I'm going to be doing quite a small cone this time. This one's only about 8 inches tall, and I've given it a coat of black acrylic paint. I'm using a square paper plate from Dollar Tree to put my glitter in. Not all glitter is created equal. I picked this up on Amazon. It's a chunky holographic glitter that's made up of hexagonal shapes in different sizes. Let's grab a plate and a dollop of Mod Podge and a foam brush. Mod Podge has a tendency to dry quite quickly, so you may have to do this in more than one section. Once I've got enough Mod Podge, I roll it back and forth in the glitter with a little bit of pressure to make sure that it gets well coated. As you can see, there are some spots where the Mod Podge dried before the glitter got adhered to it. No worries, we can just add another section of Mod Podge on top of that, since it dries quite quickly, and reapply the glitter. If you find that rolling the cone is not picking up enough glitter, you can always just dump glitter directly out of the container, because any glitter that lands in that plate is going to end up getting recycled back into that container. And I generally pat it down using my fingers to make sure all of that glitter lays flat. And just continue adding glitter to the cone in as many sections as you need until the entire cone is covered with beautiful hexagonal holographic glitter. And now I'm just going to take all of that leftover glitter that fell into the paper tray that I had below, and I'm just going to give it a little bend, and I'm going to pour it all directly back into my container, almost like those old Crisco commercials. I hardly used any at all. It was always my intention to put this tree on a base. I wanted to use one of these Dollar Tree candle holders. However, I can no longer find them at my dollar store, so on to plan B. This is just a little liqueur glass that I picked up at a secondhand store, and I believe I paid 50 cents for it. I love the shape of it, however, the color is not quite what I wanted, so I'm going to give it a coat of gloss black spray paint. So here we are in my outdoor studio, aka behind my shed, and I'm giving it a coat of gloss black spray paint. And check out that beautiful gloss shine on this. It's exactly the look that I wanted. I think this would be really pretty with a group of these. Let's do that now. Yay, we made it all the way to day 12, and now I'm having a little bit of the blues. I have had these Dollar Tree flowers kicking around for a while, and I finally figured out where to use them. Once again, I'm starting out with a coat of Silver Rust-Oleum. One of the reasons I love this color so much is that it really mimics the look of metal. Starting at the bottom and at the back, I'm using the larger of the two sizes and doing a row all the way around the bottom. I'm offsetting the flowers using the smaller ones in the second row. And rather than tucking the flowers up tightly against each other, I'm leaving a good amount of space in between them because the silver of the rhinestones plays really nicely off of the silver paint. Hot glue strands make me crazy. So I'm just going to use a little bit of masking tape to pick off some of the hot glue strands. I often use a lint roller to do this, but sometimes if the embellishments are a little bit too raised, it's easier to get in between the spaces just using a piece of masking tape. And for the next row, I'm back to the larger sized flowers. I'm applying them in the spaces between the flowers and skipping every second one. And for the remainder of the cone tree, I just continued alternating smaller and larger flowers in each row and applying them in the space between the flowers in the row below. Last row. And then I just took two of the larger flowers and attached them onto the top section of the tree using hot glue and attaching them so that they're lined up evenly. And I've used the same tree bottom that I used in week 4, which is a Dollar Tree candlestick holder painted with Silver Rust-Oleum. For a little bit of silver paint and some Dollar Tree flowers, I think that came out quite nicely. I decided to do something a bit different this time around, so I'm doing translucent Christmas cone trees that you can light up. This is a piece of plastic poster board that I picked up at Michael's. It's semi-transparent, and it's 22 by 28 inches. To start, I drafted up 2 arcs at 14 and 16 inches. For this first cone, I'm going to use this really pretty sheer fabric that I found at the fabric store in the Christmas section, and it was 70% off. You'll only need a small piece of fabric for this project. You can probably find something in the remnant section. It only needs to be about 14 or 16 inches wide. I've placed the plastic cutout on top of the fabric, and I'm just using a silver Sharpie to trace around it. In retrospect, I think it worked better to just glue the plastic poster board onto the fabric like I did in the second cone tree, but either way will work fine. Now a little bit of spray adhesive. And then I place the fabric on top. No worries if you don't get it perfectly flat the first time, because that's one of the beauties of using spray adhesive is you can reposition it. After a bit of trial and error, I found the most efficient way to put these cones together is by first using a piece of clear packing tape to hold the inside of the cone together. And then I ran a bead of E6000 down the seam. And then I used a bit of painter's tape to hold it closed while the E6000 dried. To add a little bit of extra Christmas sparkle, I decided to add these rhinestones. And I added them everywhere where there was a little end to one of the swirls. Some of the swirls have kind of a little circle end, and that's where I added the rhinestones. To ensure that they stayed in place, I used a little bit of white glue to attach them. They are adhesive rhinestones, however, they do have a tendency to want to fall off over time, so I used a little teeny bit of white glue and then put the rhinestone on top. Because this just happened to be the right size, I took the outside of a Dollar Tree mirror and gave it a coat of silver Rust-Oleum. For this next cone tree, I'm also using sheer fabric that I picked up at the fabric store. I have my translucent cone shape cut out, and I'm going to apply the spray adhesive to the smooth side. Here you can see the spray adhesive on the smooth side of the plastic poster board, which I've let dry to a tacky finish. Then I just apply it sticky side down onto the wrong side of the fabric. For this Christmas cone tree, we are going to use 3D iridescent fabric paint. This is really straightforward. Just apply the fabric paint onto the snowflake design. Be mindful, however, not to run your hand over the wet paint. Allow the paint to dry thoroughly. I let it dry overnight. In some instances, you can do multiple snowflakes without getting your hands in the way of the wet paint. As you can see, I've done all the whole snowflakes and avoided those closest to the edges. This makes it easier to turn our flat piece of plastic into a cone. Then we'll address all of the leftover snowflakes near the edges. I sprayed the underside of one long edge with spray adhesive. Then I took a piece of packing tape and applied it to the other side. Then roll the cone together, aligning the edges as best you can. The clear packing tape is on the inside of the cone. To keep the stiff plastic from popping back open, I also applied a bead of E6000 in the seam. Tape it closed and let it dry overnight. And once everything's dry, we can fill in the rest of those snowflakes around the edges. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of embellishment using some gemstones. I decided to go with blue for obvious reasons, to keep things nice and monochromatic. These are self-adhesive and come in strips, and you can just rip off one gemstone at a time. And I am applying them in the center of the snowflakes. I find it's easier to place them by first attaching them onto the end of an X-Acto blade, and then it makes them nice and easy to put into place. I think this tree looks especially nice lit up in blue. I'm starting out this project using Dollar Tree plastic chopping mats. I'm going to be making a cone out of this chopping mat, so I'm using a piece of string and a Sharpie. You want to tie your string around the Sharpie. I'm just using my finger to hold down the one end of the string, and then I'm just going to use the Sharpie to draw an arc. And be careful to not let your string go slack like I just did. You don't really need to clean this up because you probably won't see it anyway, but I'm using a little bit of non-acetone nail polish remover to clean the Sharpie off of the cutting mat. And now I'm just cutting it out. I'm using this lacy placemat that I got from the dollar store, and I'm going to just place my cutout cone shape, which is not yet folded up, on top of the placemat, and I'm going to trace around all the edges, centering it as best as possible and drawing on the back side of the placemat. Because these cutting mats are quite stiff, I'm going to use some painter's tape to hold it in place while my glue is drying. I started by folding the cutting mat into a cone shape and then taping the bottom section. And then I used a couple more pieces of tape to hold the rest of the cone in place. The cutting mats are quite stiff, so you'll probably want to pre-cut your pieces of tape before you start bending it into place. And then I squeezed a bit of E6000 into the section of the cone that was folded over onto itself. I added some more tape to reinforce it, and then I let it dry overnight. Once the glue had dried overnight, I removed the painter's tape, and then I used clear packing tape to reinforce the seam. You could probably just get away with the packing tape, but I've used both just to ensure it doesn't come apart. I ran the packing tape down the length of the cone, and then I folded it over on the bottom section. I reinforced the pointed top of the cone using clear Scotch tape. Now it's time to cut out our placemat. I've moved it onto a surface that I can glue on, and I've flipped it wrong side up. I'm using spray adhesive. Give the wrong side of the placemat a generous coating of spray adhesive, and then give it a few minutes to tack up. Keep the back side of the cone facing up so that all your seams will be in one area. Place the cone front side down in the center of the placemat. Use your hand to stick the cone to the placemat, and then fold up one side first and then roll onto the remaining side. Stick down as much as you can using your fingers, and we'll attach the rest using hot glue. It's a good idea to use a finger protector when you're doing this because the hot glue will make its way through the lacy pattern of the placemat. I decided to reinforce the seam with another piece of clear packing tape. This is on the back side of the cone, so you shouldn't see it. Trim away any overage from the placemat hanging over the edge of the cone. I'm going to be using this RGB light that I got from Amazon, I'll link it below, to light up the interior of our lacy Christmas cone tree. Look at how comfy it looks nestled amongst a bunch of my silver and white Christmas cone trees. The fun thing about this one is that you can change up the colors to match your decor. the easiest cone trees I have ever made. These are quick, easy, and inexpensive. Let's get started. This cone is 16 inches high and it's made from poster board. This one was made out of white poster board. I painted it red, but in the end I really didn't need to because I did a second one with a white cone and you couldn't see any of the cone coming through. Either way, you'll need to give it a coat of spray adhesive. I'll be doing this elsewhere, so not to mess up my craft room. You can see here that the cone has a sticky coating of spray adhesive all over it, and I've let it dry to a bit of a tacky finish. You don't want it to be really wet. I picked this yarn up at Michael's mainly because I was just absolutely in love with the color of it. I also have a link in my description box. You can pick it up on Amazon as well. It's really, really heavy and super thick. Here you can see just how thick it is. As you can see, I have a tiny space in the top of my cone where I'm going to insert the wool. If you don't have a tiny opening at the top of your cone, just make one using scissors. And secure the wool in place using hot glue. And then we just start to spin the wool around and the spray adhesive will hold it in place. Just make sure that you keep it nice and even. And I told you this was going to be easy. Once you get all the way to the bottom, do the final row using hot glue to hold it in place so that it doesn't unravel. Once the cone's entirely covered, take the final end, just tuck it into the inside and secure it down using hot glue. I love the clean, sleek simplicity of this tree, but who's to say we can't level it up? This is actually beaded garland that I bought at Dollarama. I'm sure you can find something similar at Dollar Tree or Walmart. I'm not going to use glue or anything. I'm just going to lay these on the tree, and that way if you want to change up your decor later, you can change it up. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap them around, and with the end pieces I'm just going to tuck them in between the yarn and then just wind it around. This yarn is very much like a very, very thinly cut piece of fun fur. I didn't cut a hole in the top of the cone. I just applied a line of hot glue down the seam and then attached it to the top and then wound around it to hold it in place. And the same as the last one, I've just wound the wool around the cone. With this wool, you want to ensure that you keep that flat backing side firmly up against the cone and don't let it roll. And since I'm sure you don't want to watch me wind the whole cone, here it is, all done. As with some of our previous cones, that final bottom row is glued in place with hot glue and the end is tucked underneath. To level up this white tree, I'm going to start with these green and red bows that I picked up at Dollar Tree. They come with kind of a twist tie on the back of them, and since I don't want this to show on my tree, I'm just going to take some scissors and snip it off. I'm going to be attaching these bows onto my tree using double-sided tape that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I'm just attaching a small piece of the double-sided tape to the back of my bow and then peeling off the backing. And then you simply stick them onto your tree wherever you want them. I picked this pom-pom garland up at Dollarama. I used 4 rolls of garland for this project, 2 red and 2 white. For this Christmas cone tree, we are going to wind the pom-pom garland simultaneously. So I have started by attaching the red and the white to the back of the cone at the seam as always, and then we're going to wind it around. When I got to the end of the first set of garlands, I just attached those down using hot glue. And then I attached the next set in the same order, so the white to white and the red to red, and continued on my way. And then when I got all the way to the top, I just snipped off the excess and finished it by attaching the last pom-poms down using hot glue. This is Red Heart ribbon yarn, and I picked this up at Dollarama. It's definitely outside my usual style, but I thought it would be kind of interesting to see how it worked. I attached the end at the seam to start this bottom row, and with this bottom row I kind of pulled the edge a little bit under so that it sort of tucks under and gives it a nice finished edge on the bottom. And a bit of learn as you go on this one. So I started out using, I actually used white glue, and I just ran it around the bottom with a paintbrush for that first bottom row. But then after I did that, I found that it actually worked better just to use hot glue. The other difference on these Christmas cone trees is that instead of winding in a continuous piece, I actually cut these and layered each row on top of the other because I wanted this one to be nice and straight. And as with any of these projects where you have like a start or stopping point, you want to make sure you line all those up on the back seam so that your only messy section is hopefully going to be up against the wall. This project starts with a 14-inch cone painted in Rust-Oleum Gold Metallics. Here is my fringe, and as you can see, it is 2 inches in length. So I will be doing my first line at 2 inches from the bottom of the cone. Here is a D9 pro tip for you guys. I've showed you this in some of my past videos. So in order to get really nice straight lines on your cone tree, you're going to find something that's the right height to rest your hand on to get to the place where you want to be, and then you're going to just turn your cone slowly around, keeping the bottom nice and flat on the table, and you're going to get a perfect line. Note that I used a gold Sharpie to draw my lines so that I won't have black peeking through my design. Starting at the bottom row, we're going to attach one end of the fringe using a good amount of hot glue on the one end to keep that in place. And I actually tried 2 different methods of attaching the fringe. I did it attaching the glue, the hot glue, to the back of the fringe trim. And I also did it just putting the hot glue directly onto the cone. And for my preference, I prefer just putting it right onto the cone, and I did it in a little bit of a sort of a wavy line like that. And then you just want to pull that tight while the glue sets up a little bit. And then you're just going to continue your way around until you come back to the back side of the cone and cut it and glue it in place. And there's our first row complete. For the second row, I held the trim in place and made sure it had enough of an overlap to cover the sort of solid piece at the top of the last section. And then I marked it. And here is my second line. And then I'm just repeating the process for the next row. This one has kind of a neat 3D effect when it's all done. Here are a couple of pro tips for you. You can use an inverted plant pot as a base for your cone tree, or you can flip it upright and use it as a base. When cutting out the bottom of your cone tree, this one I'm just doing on foam core, use something that's rigid and has a perfect circle shape to it. If you just draw around the bottom of your cone, it may not be perfectly circular, which may end up making your cone look slightly out of whack. And now we have a perfectly circular bottom for our tree. This cone has been given a coat of key lime green paint. I'm using this dollar store wool that has a real moss look to it. Once the spray paint was dry, I gave it a coat of spray adhesive and let that dry to a tacky finish. To start the tree, you're just going to attach a piece of yarn vertically using hot glue, and then you're going to wrap around the top of the tree to hold that yarn in place. And every now and then just give it a little bit of a push up to make sure that you're filling in all those spaces. And as always, when we get to the end, we're going to attach that final row using hot glue and then tuck the loose end under the bottom of the tree. I decided to add a bit of trim. This is some gold leaf style trim that I picked up some time ago at Dollarama. So I actually only glued the very start and finish ends on this. I like the idea that I could remove it and replace it with something else if I wanted to. So I just did a dollop of glue on the one starting end, attached that into place, and then wound. And I also glued the top end in place and trimmed it off. It looks like a mini little Christmas tree, but I felt like it needed a base, so I took this terracotta pot and gave it a coat of gold paint, and voila! That's all the Christmas cone trees that I have to share with you for now. But if you're interested in trying your hand at some DIY Christmas ornaments, check out this video right here.